Episode 152, IRONMAN Wisconsin with Nick Serratore. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Serratore about his recent race at IRONMAN Wisconsin. This race took place on September 9th, 2018, where he had a respectable time of 9 hours, 53 minutes, and 8 seconds. He's been doing triathlons for 4 years now, and he placed third in his age group at Wisconsin, which allowed him to get a slot for Kona, which is awesome. And the weather on race day was 49 to 69, with the water temperature being around 72 or so degrees. Welcome back to the show, Nick. Welcome to the show, Nick. I look forward to hearing about your race.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm excited to tell you about it.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your journey before we start diving in about this race. You had a recent race where you had a not-so-great time at this. What happened?
Yep. So I'll go back to when I actually first started this. It all started when my family decided they were going to do a 10K in Disney World. This was back in 2014 that we decided we were going to do this. And my sister turned around, and Disney does a marathon weekend. They do a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and a full marathon all in the same weekend. And my sister decided on top of the 10K, she was going to do the marathon. I was never a runner. So at this point, I had never run a 5K, running a 10K or a marathon. And I said, sure, sign me up for both of them. I'll do the 10K and marathon with her. So that was in the January 2015, and that got me started with doing all of this craziness, racing in general. I started also biking that fall and got my first road bike, but I was never an endurance athlete, so this is all new to me, and I had a less than exciting experience in the Disney Marathon. It just kind of pushed me to want to do better. So at that point, I was already biking and running, so I figured I'd learn how to swim. Coming from Minnesota, I'd known how to swim growing up, lakes and things like that. But I didn't know how to swim across a 50-meter pool without having to breaststroke. So I got a buddy of mine, his name's Grant Frost, who was a swimmer at the University of St. Thomas, got me in the water and taught me how to swim. And I did my first triathlon at the local race course of Trinona in Winona, Minnesota. And I did fourth in my age group at that lifetime triathlon event. It was a sprint triathlon. And that kind of got me slingshotted into doing this. And when I found out that I was kind of decent at it, I picked up a coach. Her name is Vicky Ostendorf. And that was in July of that same summer. And I did my first half Ironman at Superior Man in Duluth in that August. So right after that, I actually got hit by a car running.
Really? Running, not biking.
Running. I've been hit by a car biking as well. So I've been hit by both of them. A lot of my friends and coworkers say that the boat's the one that's going to get me. But I actually ended up having some really bad road rash and concussion, and just was really out of it. And I pulled myself together. I signed up for my first Ironman then. So that was for the upcoming year in 2016, which was on September 11th. And I also raced the Twin Cities Marathon in October of 2015 after being hit by the car. So about a month later. And I was able to run a 3 hour and 20-minute marathon off of being hit by the car, which was honestly way above my own expectations. So fast forward, I did my first Ironman in September of 2016, and I had a fantastic race. The swim was pretty decent. I was an hour and 5 minutes out of the water roughly, and around, I believe, 5 hours and 15 minutes off the bike. But my run left a lot to be, a lot for me to be desired. It was 3 hours and 49 minutes. And I ended up finishing, I believe, 47th overall, and I don't remember what it was by gender or age group. I believe I was 11th in my age group, but it was a 10-hour and 18-minute day, and it was a great first experience, and I decided that I was going to go back and I was going to do it again in 2017. 2017 was the one where things got a little bit rough. So about 5 days before the race, I had a massage, and I hadn't had one in about a month, and it was very deep tissue. So it was the Wednesday before the race is on Sunday. And I ended up afterwards getting just super sick, and I had a fever, night sweats. It was just pretty awful. And my stomach turned on me for about the next 3 days. So I couldn't really eat. My electrolytes were all thrown off. And then finally, I started to kind of feel better on Saturday. So I went into the race on Sunday knowing that I had had this hard week going in, and I put in all this training. I'm just going to give this the best shot that I had. And the swim was all right. But then when I got into the bike, about halfway through, I started getting sick. And I got bloated, and my electrolytes were completely out of whack. And I was probably dehydrated. And so the back half of the bike was just about getting to that, the finish of that. And I think I was around, give or take, 7 hours off the bike or something like that, if I remember right. And when I got into the run, my dad was standing there in transition, and he asked me what was up. And I said, I'm sick. I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to try and get to the finish line. And it's going to be a really long day. So I started running and quickly found out that that wasn't going to be good. My stomach started to cramp up, and I had to run bathroom to bathroom if I was going to go that way. So by the time that I got probably about 2 or 3 miles into the run, I was only walking, and I couldn't eat anything because it would just go right through me. So I ended up having to walk basically the whole marathon to get to the finish line. And by the time that I got to the finish line, well, running shoes are not made to be walked in. They give you a little bit of extra space so that your feet can splay out when you actually land. And that gave me some blisters that were pretty unbelievable on the bottoms of my feet. But when I crossed the finish line, it was 56 degrees outside. And because I had no calories left in my body from having not eaten anything, as well as burning it all off, I immediately went into hypothermia. So I ended up having my best friend, Jack, there, and he and my cousin and my parents basically, well, I was an idiot. I said that I didn't want to go to the medical tent. Dumb mistake. If you're in that situation, go to the med tent. But I ended up having them carry me back to the room, and I have a background in chemistry. I know a lot of medical people, and the key was that I just needed to get some calories back in my body, some sugar, so that my body could start thermoregulating again. So they put me in a warm bath, and I drank Pepsi until my body started to warm itself back up again. Wow. So that was a pretty tough scenario, and I had to make a promise to my parents I'd never do that to myself again. So
why didn't you just pull the cord on the run? Just say, hey, this is just too much. I'm out.
That's not me. I don't do that. I knew that I had the time to get to the finish line by walking, and it's just, if I'm going to start something, I'm going to finish it. That's just my own personal feelings towards it.
Okay, so what makes you want to do long-distance triathlons to begin with?
That's a good question. I mean, why would you want to do an Ironman? The amount of pain you put yourself through. I would say that my are 70.3s. You can go out, you feel like you did something really, really great that day. The bike's not too long. You don't have all sorts of really awful rubbing and chafing that you get from that. And on top of it, the run is 13 miles. Your calves aren't screaming at you for the next week, and your legs are such that a day or two later you're able to start up training or start doing other things. But there's something about doing an Ironman that gives, well, at first it gave you a certain level of appreciation for what those people do. And it also, in many ways, I feel like brought me into a community of people who I have the tattoo on the back of my right leg. And if I'm walking around in the streets somewhere, in Florida or whatever, and somebody sees it and they've done one, I will have them come up to me immediately. They don't even ask, have you done one or anything? It's which one did you do? How did you do? How was your day? And it gives you some sort of connection with somebody, and it's an unbelievable experience. So that reason was why I, wanted to go back. But after, the second one, I really considered, do I really want to do a third one? And that was when I decided that I would give this one more chance. I was 29 this year when I raced IRONMAN Wisconsin. And so this is my last year in my age group. And when you go to 30, 34, that is a much deeper field. It is a much harder field. And I wanted to give this one more run to try and get to Kona. So that was my reasoning for going after it one more shot. It was my goal from basically the first time that I saw an Ironman World Championship race that I wanted to be there. I wanted to do that. So I guess this was my way of giving it that last strong effort. And I was very, very fortunate that it went to 3 people this year.
Wow.
In my age group.
So, Nick, you're really good at avoiding the question here. Why do you do triathlons that are long course? Like, what's your why behind this? What's the driving passion behind you?
If you saw my times for a short course triathlon, you would understand that, especially some people around the Minnesota area, they can do those runs with a 5.5 minute mile. My top end speed is about a 6.5 minute mile, but I can go a long distance fairly quickly. And I also have the leg strength and the endurance factor that makes, for some reason, happen to be good at the longer distance triathlons. I enjoy it. So that's genuinely why. Short distance ones are fun too, but I'm just never, I don't know what it is about my own personal training, or maybe I need to spend some more time on quickness drills or something like that to get faster. But it's those longer distance races where I kind of excel at the most, I feel.
Okay. So to kind of shift gears to talk about this race, how was your mind of selecting the right race? Did you have an idea of saying, well, I want this course or this time of year or anything like that? Was it just, hey, this one's close, let's do this one?
To a certain extent, it was this one's close, but especially after 2017, I needed a little bit of revenge on that course. There was a little bit of unfinished business there that I felt like that I needed to go after. But on top of that, so my background is such that I started graduate school for my PhD in chemistry in 2012, and I actually just wrapped that up in December of 2017. So when I didn't know that I was going to be necessarily defending my PhD in December. I didn't know how long that was going to take. So being able to plan something where I would be traveling somewhere else was a little complicated for my situation, especially in that type of an environment. So Madison was, yes, it was close, and it's one of those things where I was able to know that I can drive there and not have to worry about taking a lot of time off if I was still going to be doing my graduate school work.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, going into this race, what does your support crew look like?
So I am a part of a group called Tri Fitness in White Bear Lake. And, so I have a lot of friends and, a lot of people that have done races with me on and off throughout the last 3 years that I've been with them. And so very large support group community there. On top of that, there were, I believe, 6 of us athletes from Tri Fitness that were actually at the race. And, all of them were doing their first ones, and I was the one who was doing the number 3. So I guess I was in some ways a supporter of them and helping them, get an idea of what that day was going to look like and the expectations that they should have for that day. And then on top of it, I have, through Tri Fitness, they have other coaches as well. So I have a swim coach through them, a bike coach, and then my coach Vicky is primarily strength and running focus. But then my family was there, so I had my mom and dad, my sister, her husband, my best friend from college, who, ironically, he was a traveling musician when he lived with us during undergrad. And then he moved back to Madison, and I did my first year of graduate school there. So him and I just got closer during that time, and he's been at every one of my races when I was in Madison for Ironman. And I can't thank him enough for having been there for me for that. And then I also had my cousin out with us that day as well. So I had a great group of people. And when I was on the run course, thankfully I had them kind of positioned out there such that they were able to give me some information about where I was relative to the other competitors in my age group. So I had an idea of, what I needed to do to get to the finish line where I wanted to be. Not necessarily where I thought I needed to be for that moment. I only thought that we were going to get 2 slots. And so I knew I was on the line when I had finished. But on top of that, there's other Minnesota athletes that were out there. And one of them, her name is Hannah Griniker. She finished 2nd overall in the race for amateur women. And her boyfriend, Sean Cooley, who races for Everyman Jack, was out there. I actually just bought his fat bike. So him and I are going to do some fat bike racing this wintertime in northern Minnesota. It's a great community. The Minnesota triathlon community is unbelievable. And the amount of support that you get on top of the people that you actually train with on a day-to-day basis. So I had other people out there who I wish that I knew their names. They knew mine. I'm horrible with names, so I apologize to all of them. But I felt like I had just a giant community out there supporting me on that day in particular.
Wow. Now, going into this race, what was your training like?
This year, I took a different approach to it than the years before. Years before, I had a lot more races, smaller races, shorter races in my repertoire. 2017, I actually also did Grandma's Marathon in June of that year. And that actually, in my opinion, pulled away from a certain amount of my triathlon specific training, and especially the healing time that you need to go through after a marathon probably pulled away from the amount of focus that I was able to have on that Ironman in particular. So this year I actually went to a more training focused type of I guess planning schedule wise, where I did more training and less racing. So I think I only did 1 short course race in June. I did an Olympic in early July and a half iron at the end of July as a tune-up. Otherwise, I really didn't race much during the summer. And I would say on average, I do average week 15 hours of training, I would say, roughly. I'm more along the lines of a high intensity focus trainer. And when I do my training, I make sure that I get the work in, and I, really, really beat myself up to get to, the adaptations that you're searching for. But I don't necessarily believe that you need to spend 20, 25 hours a week, doing this type of training to be good at it. You really can get a lot of strong training time in a short period of time if you do it correctly.
Okay. So what was your longest swim, bike, and run workouts going into this race?
Longest swim was a 2.5 mile swim, and that day actually was also followed by a 100-mile bike ride and then a 10-mile run. So that was, we affectionately refer to that as our long effing day through our training group. And then I had a 16-mile run just as its own standalone workout as well. And that was about 2.5 weeks ahead of the race. And otherwise, my longest bike ride was 110 miles just on its own. And that's just sitting on your rear end and just making sure that you're putting in the time out there doing it. There's really no expectation for pacing or you're keeping your watts low in particular. So I do race on power, and actually I run on power as well.
Okay, so you have the stride and you have the power meter for your bike?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yep.
So what's your FTP at right now?
My FTP is 350.
Okay.
And I was I was planning on racing Ironman Wisconsin at 245. And then I got into the race and I was around 250 through the first, give or take, 25 miles. and I was feeling really good. And so I think once you start, for those who aren't familiar with the Ironman Wisconsin course, there are 3 hills that are affectionately known as the 3 bitches. And those 3 hills you hit twice because it's a double loop out there. And I think my wattage spiked for average during that particular stretch into the 260s. I think that when I looked at the end results, my VI, so my normalized power versus my average power, was about a 1.04, and my average power was 254, and it was flatlined across the whole race. So it was a really good day. Yeah,
that's very good. I mean, because 1.04 is about where you want it, right?
Yep, that's exactly. Yeah, as long as you keep it under 1.05, life is good. And in particular for that race, I also looked at my heart rate drift as it started to kind of get warmer out on the roads, as you get fatigued. And my power to heart rate ratio was negative across the whole bike. And in the last 20 miles, it was 0. So I didn't really have heart rate drift either, which meant that I wasn't really fatiguing myself, and I wasn't having any issues with hydration related things where your blood volume is actually decreasing. So I was very well hydrated out on the course, and all around it was a fantastic bike.
Okay. Now, with your training based off of power, are you willing to hit a certain percentage of your FTP? What does this look like for you?
Usually that race, I was trying to be conservative to save it for the run, because I knew that back end of that run, especially for the run course at Ironman Wisconsin, it's got one heck of a hill. It's called Observatory Hill, and it's notorious for people walking it. And I knew that I needed to have a stellar run, and I wanted to finish feeling really good. So I went for originally about 70% of my FTP was what I was figuring on, between 70 and 75, which is what it ended up coming out to be at the end of the day. I usually race half iron between 80 and 83% is kind of what I look for there as well.
Okay. Now, did you do a lot of bricks in training? What did this look like?
Yes. Yep. I do a lot of bricks. Just about every weekend I have a brick. And usually during the week, I will have a shorter brick, which is a really intense bike ride, high FTP intervals, and then go out for a 3-mile run or a 2-mile run where I'm trying to get some speed out of my legs during that to try and get used to that run, the bike to run change that you have there. And then on the weekends, those are my longer bike rides and longer bricks. So you get 60, 70, 80 mile rides with a 5 to 8 mile run afterwards, I would say.
Okay. Now, were you doing strength training in your core program as well?
Yep. I also do some strength work, especially in the early season. So winter time going into spring, I do a lot more functional strength training. I don't do a lot of heavy weightlifting. I do a lot of TRX work and things along that line. And then I also, I've had issues with IT band syndrome and things like that. So I'm always trying to stay on top of my own physical therapy work. So doing clams with TheraBands and things of that nature to maintain glute strength and as well as core strength training.
Clams with
put a band around your knees, so one of those looped bands, and you basically bring your legs apart, and it works the glute med and glute mid. So that's involved with your hip balance when you're running. And if you start having hip dip issues, that's when you're going to end up having some IT band syndrome and some knee issues coming out of that.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Now, as volume increases and intensity within that volume increases, how do you and Vicky mitigate the risk of you getting injured?
That is something that I primarily leave up to her. I also have, so the Normatec legs are something that a lot of people use. I have a different brand. It's called Air Relax. So I like to lounge out in those in the evenings. Otherwise, I'm also trying to stay on top of foam rolling and taking care of myself in that regard. But the biggest thing that I would say is that when I hit a rest day, I treat it as a rest day. And I make sure that for lower intensity workouts, treat it as a low intensity workout. And when you have interval days, when it says you have a rest interval in there, truly treat it as a rest interval. There's a lot of science out there that when you're cheating yourself by trying to have that rest interval be a little bit more of a workout than it probably should be, you're actually hurting yourself and not allowing yourself to perform at the best level. So when you're able to recover properly and perform the workouts at the right level, for the most part, we're able to mitigate a lot of the injury things that way.
Okay. Now, if we take a look at the last 6 months of training going into this race, how many training days did you miss? So August was actually a tough month for me. We had a family reunion in the beginning of August, and then about a week after that, our family pet passed away. And then a week after that, my grandfather passed away. So it was a rough August. So I think I missed, amongst the whole month of August, I missed 2 training days. But things just had to move around, and you had to be a little bit flexible with how things were working out in that regard. Otherwise, I would say that I was averaging 2 to 3 training days that I would miss a month. But when that happened, we would usually try and, when I say I missed the training day, I didn't get the workout in on that day, and we would usually try and figure out how to move a rest day to make it work in such that I really wasn't losing anything in that regard. I was fortunate also this year that I didn't get sick. That was one thing that both of the previous years I got sick during the summertime training for this, which is, in many ways a sign of overtraining at that point. So I was fortunate in this regard that I wasn't, hindered in that way where I actually missed training days. That makes sense. Now, what workouts did you do that gave you the most confidence to go into this race prepared mentally and physically?
I'm weird. I love my FTP tests. My FTP tests, we actually have there's a group in the Twin Cities. It's called Ride and Glide. They do a monthly time trial, and it's a 13.4 mile time trial. Comes out to be, if you're able to hold that magical 26.8 miles an hour, that's a half hour on the nut. And that is my FTP test, because I feel that the 20-minute test doesn't give me a good, accurate description of what an Ironman's going to do to my body. So I like the 30-minute and take 95% of the average power over the course of that. And when I got to the end of that last time trial, I believe that was the second weekend, August, and I just knocked it out of the park. And, that my FTP was at 350. I felt really, really good about that. And, that told me my bike was ready. But the one that really told me that I was ready for this race was that Chisago half Ironman, where I took 7th place overall in that race. And that was a PR for me on that race by about 14 minutes.
Wow.
It was 4 hours, 28 minutes, and I think 9 seconds or something along those lines. And I got into that run off of that bike, and I was able to run, I believe it was around an hour and 31 or hour and 32 half marathon, which I had never done before. And I had finally put together what I felt was like the correct nutrition plan and things like that, where I found out that I was able to eat a lot more on the bike than I thought that I necessarily needed to. And it really benefited me going into the run. So I found out that I was able to eat 300 calories. So I was eating a full tube of the Cliff Blocks, which is 200 calories. And I was doing the margarita flavor one, so I get triple the salt. I'm a heavy sweater, especially salt loss. So I'm always keeping an eye on that. So I ate one of those an hour on top of also doing the sea salt goo Roctanes, which have extra salt and caffeine in them. So I was doing a pull off of that. So there were 300 calories there on top of drinking about 24 ounces of Gatorade Endurance every hour on the bike, which is another 180 calories. So I was around about 500 calories on the bike when I was doing that race. When I got to the run, I dropped back to trying and hitting about 300 calories an hour on the run using the goo Roctanes. But it really worked well for me, and I had felt fantastic after the race. Actually, a bunch of the people that were at the race, I brought beer along, and we were enjoying beers afterwards at the finish line, so that was good.
Wow. And Joe was there. Did you see Joe?
Yes, absolutely. Joe was ahead of me. Gosh, I think that he ended up taking third or he was. So Sean Cooley took second, and I think that Joe might have been right behind him. So yeah, those Everyman Jack guys, they're impressive athletes to watch, and you aspire to be them if you're in this area, because we usually have 3 to 4 of them that show up at the bigger races around here, and they're just impressive to watch. So especially their work ethics and seeing what they do out on the course and how they approach different races. It's great learning experience. And I actually would say that having watched them is how I've learned a lot about how to race myself.
Right. And one thing that I learned about a few of the athletes on EMJ is not only are they fast and not only do they race well and all that, but they're humble people.
They are great people. Absolutely.
You can't say enough about the actual person that is actually the athlete. Like,
no,
it's just unbelievably how humble, and they care about everybody else that is on the course.
Exactly. And they're at the finish line for hours afterwards cheering on the other people. They finish light years ahead of many people, and they're still out there cheering and congratulating people. And they take the time to say hello to the people who follow them. And they are some of the best people that I know. And also, I will say this about them as well. They are incredible overachievers too in their daily lives. Joe Adrians works here at Boston Scientific, and then Sean Cooley's in his second year of residency at the University of Minnesota as a cardiac anesthesiologist. So you talk about these guys and their work ethic and how hard they train, and they're doing these other amazing things as well, and being great members of the community, as well as, obviously cardiac anesthesiologists. That's just a time commitment that I can't even understand. So
on top of life, work, and all this other fun stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, of course. Just a day in the life.
Yeah. So when you're not training or racing, what are you doing? Hey, everybody. I just want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. And I just want to let you know that I've enjoyed having so many people on this show. And I couldn't really do it without your support. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and being a part of what I'm doing. If you would, take a few moments to leave me a review over on iTunes. It would help me out tremendously. And enjoy the show. So when you're not training or racing, what are you doing?
I now work at 3M. I am a patent agent. So after I finished my PhD in December, I ended up taking a few months and studying for the United States Patent and Trademark Office exam, which I passed at the end of March, and soon after began a contract job at 3M. And I actually just interviewed for a permanent position there yesterday. So today is Saturday. I interviewed yesterday, and it's for a intellectual property liaison position. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get that, and I can really put down roots here in the St. Paul area of the Twin Cities.
Nice. So how difficult is balancing working full-time, I'm assuming, and training 15 hours a week with other family duties as well?
So I am fortunate as of right now that I do not have a significant other. That was by design, that I decided that I didn't want to put somebody through a lot of that with this type of training. Now that hopefully will change in the future. We'll see what happens. It'd be nice if I had somebody that was a triathlete to do this with, because then I'd have a friend out there and I don't spend so much time alone. But in reality, my family is fantastic. So I'm from northern Minnesota. It's a small town called Grand Rapids. And when I go home to visit my family, I mean, it's a 3-hour drive, and I'm packing up bags of swim gear, bike gear, run gear. Your bike has to go on, and all of it travels with me north, even if it's just for 2 or 3 days. So my family understands the commitment and the time that I'm putting into this, and they're the first ones when I get up in the morning. And during summertime, we live on a lake up there, and I look out at the water and I'm thinking to myself, God, no, I don't want to go jump in you right now. It looks freaking cold. And they look at me and they're like, really? Get your ass out there. So they're also motivational, which is nice. I'll say that I have a lot of, on my dad's side of the family, we have a lot of athletes, and two of them, my two uncles are college hockey coaches, and they give fantastic advice and are very supportive and understand the commitment of an athlete to be able to compete at the highest levels. And you'll learn a lot from watching them and how they motivate their players and motivate themselves. For my cousins, motivate themselves on a daily basis to perform at the levels that they did. So I had one cousin still plays college hockey for the Air Force Academy, but otherwise the other two, one played Division III college hockey, the other one played Division I here at the University of Minnesota, then the college baseball player as well. So, I mean, unbelievable athletes and incredible people that you learn how to be motivated and how to, I guess, strive for, your full potential. You have a family like that.
Right. Now, to shift gears slightly to actually talk about going to this race, what was race week like for you? When did you start traveling, and when did you get to Madison?
Race week it really began for me on Thursday. So Thursday morning, I had a preliminary interview for this one that I had yesterday. And so after that interview, I packed up all my equipment and I drove from the Twin Cities to Madison. I got in around 5 or 6 o'clock, and you're going to laugh at me. I had a handful of cocktails that night. So this year I subscribe to the mindset that I needed to relax. If there was one thing about last year that I found about myself was that I was really uptight and I was really intense and focused and, many of these things. But I kind of lost a lot of the fun that went into doing an Ironman and looking around at the people and seeing the athletes that were there for the first time and, the nervousness and the excitement. So this year I relaxed a lot more and I enjoyed myself. So, I got in that evening and I met up with a few of the athletes from Tri Fitness that were also staying at the Concourse Hotel on the square with me, near the finish line of Ironman Wisconsin. And those three were, first time Ironman triathletes. They're competing that weekend, and I was the only one having a cocktail. So, I don't know if that says something about me and my attitude or anything like that, but I was enjoying the evening. And then the next one, so the Friday, I went into gear bag check-in. So, picking up packet and all of that, part of it that goes with it. And then that evening I met up with my, old roommate, best friend that lives in Madison. His name's Jack. And Jack and I went over and had dinner at, a nice restaurant and had a couple of beers that evening, and I went to bed at I think around 9 o'clock, and I made sure that I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep the night before Ironman very well, especially with having to get up really early on the morning of. So I wanted to make sure that I got a great night of sleep on Friday night going into Saturday, and I really did. So I think I got like about 9.5 or 10 hours of sleep that night. And next day I woke up and my family drove in. They actually were staying with some family of ours in Milwaukee, visiting them before they came in on Saturday. And got my parents together, and we went and did a bike and gear bag check-in together. And Mom was taking all the pictures. She thought this was going to be the last Ironman, so making sure that all the memories are there for her scrapbooking. And it was fun. And I ended up running that day into Sean Cooley and Hannah Griniker, who were also doing their check-in, and we got to talk a little bit about the possibility. So for those who are listening, Wisconsin got hit by a pile of rain in the last 3 weeks, and it's kind of devastating. So, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more made out of the fact that so many of the people that we were passing on the bike course during this race had flooding issues and that they had lost a lot in their homes. And, it would be nice to be able to give some back to the community because they were all out there cheering and supporting us and jumping up and down. It's unbelievable, the amount of support that's on that course. But the question for the day going into the race was if there was going to be a swim due to the water levels and the potential that there could be bacterial issues and if the water wasn't clean for us to be able to race. So, that was the number one topic of conversation while we were there. It ended up that we were able to do the whole 2.4 mile swim, and the rest of the race went down without a flaw. So, Ironman is fantastic about making sure that they have all the logistics figured out, and it worked out very well. And they did a fantastic job making sure that all the athletes were safe on that day and that they had done their due diligence to make sure that the course was safe that day as well.
Wow. So to highlight a little bit more about your bags here, what were you putting in each bag and why?
Okay. So for the swim to bike bag, I had bike shoes in there and my helmet. So they don't allow us to put our helmets on our bikes like they do at many races. It turns out that the transition in Ironman Wisconsin is actually inside of a building. It's called the Monona Terrace. So you run up a helical parking structure, and then you run inside, grab your gear bag, and then diverge. Women go one direction, men go the other direction to change into what you're going to wear on the bike. So I actually wear the same outfit the whole day. My tri-kit is Louis Garneau long course tri-kit. But I have my shoes in the bag, I have my socks, and then I was also getting some lace bite on the top of my ankles. So if anybody's struggling with lace bite issues or anything like that, there's a fantastic product through what's called Bunga Pad. And they have these silicone, they're give or take 3 millimeters thick of silicone that is just a slip-on nylon sock, basically, that has this pad in it that completely takes care of any issues for the lace bite, as well as they make one for heel spurs, which is fantastic. I use them all the time when I was a hockey player. And so I had a Bunga pad in there for top of my left foot, which was struggling with that. Otherwise, I had the remaining nutrition that I didn't put on the bike. So I had the Goo makes a Hydra pack or a hydrogel pack where you're able to squeeze gels into there, and it's basically a giant flask of goo. So I had that in the bag, and then a couple extra goo or Cliff Blocks to throw in my back pockets. But otherwise, yeah, I'm pretty simple. I only carry a small amount of equipment with me in that gear bag. And that, nope, my cycling helmet has a visor built into it. Okay. So that's the, I believe, Rudy Project one that has the visor that actually flips up, and it's actually works fantastic. So one of my best investments was that Rudy Project helmet. And then in my bike to run bag, I keep a change of socks because for all the things you do on the bike that don't necessarily need to be discussed all the time, you do want to change your socks after biking. And I also have bike shoes, my run shoes in there, my race belt with my bib on it. And then I believe I had a water bottle that was filled with just basic water. And I actually keep in there because of the situation that I had in 2017, I keep Imodium and an emergency kit basically to help ward off any issues that I may have when I was, if I have any issues like that in the run. And then a hat and sunglasses are in there as well.
Okay. Now, as far as going into this race, the day before the race, are you trying to get in a certain meal or nutrition plan for the day before?
Yep. So I eat usually The big meal is on Friday. So I eat a big high calorie, high carb meal on Friday, and I want it to clear my system on Saturday. That's the main reason that I'm doing that. And any type of, small workouts that I do on Saturday in preparation for Sunday aren't going to drain my glycogen enough for it to be a factor. So I make sure that I have the big meal on Friday. Saturday, I eat a larger breakfast. I avoid fiber like the plague. That is one thing that you don't necessarily want in you at that point. And yeah, exactly, no roughage, none of the green stuff. So it was the hotel I was at. I had eggs and bacon and a big cinnamon roll that morning and lots of coffee. I'm a kind of a caffeine addict. And then for lunch, actually, the hotel had a fantastic prime rib, sheer prime rib, like French dip sandwich with grilled onions on it. That was fantastic. And then I had tomato soup at that meal. For the evening before the race, I'm a weird specimen. I like Jimmy John's. So I'm simple. Order a basic, ham and turkey sandwich without any of the roughage on it. And you get your mayo on there and all that, but it's mostly it's all of your basic needs that you might need for macronutrients for the day of the race, which is why I kind of lean towards that, and I know my stomach can handle it. Okay. So that's a lot of how I approach it.
Nice. Now then, going into this race, what time did you want to get in bed?
I wanted to be in bed by 9 because I knew that I was going to struggle falling asleep, and I usually I'll do some reading before I go to bed. And so in this case, I was trying to put myself to sleep, so I was reading a patent that I was working on the prosecution work for. So if you want something that's going to put yourself to sleep, try reading a patent. And I think I fell asleep around 9:30 or 9:45, but I was up at 3:45 the next morning. Wow. Ready to start getting going.
Now, I know that you're staying pretty close to transition, so it's walking distance, but in between the time that you wake up and the time that you leave your hotel, what are you doing?
The very first thing that I did that day was that I went and I started making my breakfast. So that was, I brought English muffins with me and a toaster, and I made 2 English muffins and I lather them up in peanut butter. That's my highlight of the day. That's the only real food I'm going to get until I'm done with that race. So that's the first thing that I'm on top of. While they're toasting, there is a product called the Right Stuff. It's actually supposedly made by NASA. I don't know. Basically, it's about 1,700 milligrams of sodium, and you mix it into 16 to 20 ounces of water. It tastes like complete garbage, but that's my salt loading. And I actually also do that the day before in the morning, is making sure that I'm getting a lot of salt in my system. I find that I am a very salty sweater, so I'm going to deplete my electrolytes over the course of that race, and making sure that I'm loaded up at the beginning of the race is what I have found to be a strategy that works for me. So I did the Right Stuff that morning, right away in the morning, and then I poured myself my cup of coffee to start getting some caffeine and some other movement in the system to get things going, as you could say. And by about 4:30 or 4:45, I was ready to go. I don't know what it is about the day of a race, but my system is more willing to get life going for me, and I'm able to get most of what I need done right away. So then I threw on my tri-kit and threw on my wearable. So I have a Garmin 920, and then also I'm wearing a Garmin heart rate monitor as well. And threw together the rest of my wetsuit and goggles and swim cap and all of that stuff into a bag, and all of the Gatorade and water and stuff that I was going to be putting on my bike with me. And I started heading for transition.
Okay. Now, whenever you got to transition, you're putting roughly 100 in your wheels and then 95 in the rear, right?
100 in the rear, 95 in the front.
Okay, yep. Mixed up. And
yep,
you're also using tubeless this time with the Zipps.
Yep. So I had been running latex tubes in them, and I liked it. And then I got a fat bike recently from a buddy of mine, Sean, and I also have a cross bike that I run tubeless. And I looked into this tubeless system, and it turns out that one of the best rolling resistance tires is run tubeless. And I will honestly say I hadn't used that tire until that day. It's only an 800-mile tire, and it's got very low puncture resistance, so it's not something you want to use on a day-to-day basis. But for a race course where they're going to have swept the course beforehand, it sounded fast and it felt fast out there that particular day. So that was the Vittoria Speed Corsa tire. I will not race on anything else except for that going forward, probably. You don't have to worry about pinch flats also when you're running tubeless, which is something that I really, really like. So basically 90 to 95% of your flats are on a pinch flat with a tube. And when you can get rid of that type of a flat, that makes your day a little bit better.
Wow. Now, whenever you got to transition, aside from airing up your tires and making sure your brakes weren't rubbing, what else are you doing aside from putting your nutrition on your bike?
I have red E-Tap, SRAM red E-Tap system on my bike. So I was putting the batteries on, making sure that all of the gears were changing properly, that I didn't have any issues there. And then I was also making sure that I knew I had a game plan of where I was coming out of the water, how I was going to run into transition, where I was coming out of transition going to the bike. So I kind of knew a game plan with regards to envisioning what I would be doing in about, a couple, 3 hours after, since it was around 5 o'clock in the morning at that point. And on top of that, I would say that I was also making sure that everything that I needed in general was there on the bike. Flat kit was on the back. I had all the Gatorade I needed. I made sure that my bike computer was on so that when I got to the bike, I was ready to go and that everything was on point and there was no questions about what needed to be done when I got there.
Okay. Now, whenever you left transition, you know that this is going to be a wetsuit legal race, so you have your wetsuit there, you have your goggles, your swim cap, and maybe some nutrition, hydration, whatnot. But whenever you got to probably about 35, 40 minutes out from the race starting, what was your mindset like?
I'm not a swimmer. I'm not a big fan of I enjoy the swim once I get into it, but getting in the water takes a little bit of effort on my point. So it was more along the lines of, getting excited about what I was going to be approaching that day. So I wanted to make sure that I was enjoying all the, the things that were going into that moment. So in particular, at that point, I was meeting up with my coach. Vicky was there just outside of transition. I was meeting up with my parents. I was meeting up with other athletes that I knew that were at the race. And we were all just kind of talking about what the day would be and how to approach all of the different parts of that race. And in particular, Vicky was reminding me about how my sight line would be in the swim and making sure that the sun was starting to come up at that point and how to approach the glare that would be coming off the water. And she was just really trying to keep me focused. And then also how to approach the fact that there was about a 6 or 7 mile an hour wind, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it was out of the northeast, which is the long stretch of the lake. And this IRONMAN Wisconsin swim course is one giant rectangle roughly. And your swim start and swim end are at the same location, but it's about halfway along one long side of that rectangle. So the long stretch on the backside was dead into the wind, and that there was a certain amount of chop out there as well. So, getting prepared to start drinking some water too.
Gotcha. Now you're in your rolling start corral here. Where are you seeing yourself at?
At that point, wanted to make sure that I was near what I thought it would do was 1 hour and 5 minutes was where I was hoping to be. So I was near the front, but if there was one gripe that a lot of the athletes had about that course was that they didn't break down the rolling start very well. It was an hour to an hour and 10 was the very far, and the furthest to the front you could go. There was no sub 1 hour. So athletes were just really piled up on each other at the front there. Yeah. So it was weird. And I kind of put myself around that hour and 5 mark, where I thought it would be. And then at that point, my friend Hannah Griniker came up to me. She found me at the front and she said, "Hey, the course is about 200 meters long." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." I didn't ask her how she knew that. Didn't matter. We're all going to race the same distance. So, okay, great. Screw your head on for an extra 200 meters just in case, right? So, at that point, that was how I kind of approached it. I knew that I wanted to be around where I should finish because I really don't want people crawling over me who are faster than me. And then I also want to make sure that I could draft off of people that might be just a little bit faster than me, but that I could stay on their feet if I was able to get in that position.
Gotcha. So whenever the swim starts, how does your swim go for you?
When the swim starts, I usually will try and get out to a fairly quick start, get a lot of quick strokes in to get my shoulders warmed up because they didn't allow us to warm up before this race. So we were all on a cold start. So that is hard in and of itself. But I try to get a bunch of, high turnover strokes in to start. And then you're not going to be able to go off of any type of speed or anything. You have really no concept of how you're doing perceived exertion. So I kind of got a rhythm that I thought would be the right tempo for what I wanted to do for that day. Also, one of the things that I was really focused on was not using my legs very much. I really didn't want to use my legs at all for that swim so that I could really save them for that bike. So I mostly did a 2-beat kick that would be able to just rotate my body position in the water and have the best streamline.
Okay. Now, whenever you start getting on the backstretch with the chop, how did you approach this mentally?
It's a grind. It's one of those things that you know that it's there and that you're going to be fighting through it for a long stretch. Really, I break it up into pieces. So I counted the number of buoys on the backstretch, and it was just about hitting the buoys and counting down buoys is how I approached it. I'm the type of swimmer that I like to hit every buoy just about when I'm swimming, so I swim in the straightest line possible. And the other thing is that when I did get behind a person who I was able to draft off of to a certain extent, it was really just thinking about, okay, where are the bubbles at? How am I following that person's feet? Is that person sighting the right direction? Are they heading in the right direction, not leading me off in a wrong direction or a long line such that I'm swimming farther? But I try to really focus also on my technique. The more mentally engaged I am on my technique, the more time goes by quickly. So making sure I have a high elbow catch and making sure that my pull is fully extended back to my thigh before I turn over again, and keeping my one arm out in front of me to keep my balance and head position in the water. I'm really trying to just continually go through a checklist of all of those different things on a rolling basis, and that helps the swim go by a little bit quicker for me. Also, when there is that chop out there, if you do catch a big gulp of water, making sure that it's fine to swallow it, but then get that breath in that you missed right away. That way you're able to keep your oxygen levels such that your muscles don't start to go on you at such a rapid pace that can happen during a swim like that. Okay.
Now, whenever you start getting ready to get out of the water, are you doing anything different to start preparing to start running?
I really don't. I know a lot of people will start really flexing their feet and kind of trying to get their Achilles, warmed up because you've kind of been doing, keeping your toes pointed for such a long time. I'm really at that point starting to think about, okay, what do I need to do in this transition to accomplish what I need to? Am I going to go to the wetsuit strippers? Am I going to be running this? What is my, goal with this transition? And I'll come out and say right away that between the two transitions for this race and the swim, I wanted my time to be under an hour and 20 minutes. I knew that was cool. I knew that's what would put me in a good position for being able to have the sub, what I was hoping for at the time, 9:50 day, but for sure a sub 10-hour day. So at that point, when I came out of the water in that point, and I looked up and I saw I was at an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, first of all, I kind of just shoved it off and said, yeah, looked down at the watch. She was right. It was about 250 yards long. So 200 meters, that's not too, wrong in that regard. But then also on top of it, knowing, all right, I need to kick it down for this transition because it's a long run in Ironman Wisconsin to get into where the transition zone is.
Really?
Yeah. So you start down by the lake, and it's about I'd give it 150, 200 yard run to the base of a parking structure that's like a corkscrew. And you run up this corkscrew, and you go up, I believe, 2 or 3 stories, and then you come out onto a flat. And that's probably one of the coolest parts of the race, by the way, is that you have all of the people that are out there watching the race line that whole corkscrew as you're climbing it, and they're all cheering for you. It's really that one moment where they're on top of you, and they can see, how you're doing coming out of the water. It's also the moment of the race where if you look at your heart rate data, your heart rate's through the because your body's used to being on a horizontal plane, and now you're vertical, and blood's pumping in weird ways that it's not used to, and you're running uphill. So it's all sorts of, you're out of breath by the time you get into transition. But yeah, I mean, I definitely knew that I needed to make sure that transition was on point. So I was going about as hard as I could up that transition up the corkscrew into the building to grab my gear bag.
Wow. Now, at this point, you kind of knew that your swim was a little bit lower than what you had expected, and you knew to kind of just shrug that off, don't let it get into your psyche about that.
Yes.
And then you get ready to get out on the bike ride. What was your mindset going from this point forward into the race?
My mindset was that I was entering my favorite part of the race. This is the part where I excel. I love my bike. So that is an understatement. I mean, when my coach saw me about 57 or 58 miles into that bike and she was out on the course, people aren't supposed to look that happy at that point, man, is what she told me. But it was, I was ready for being able to get into that and really have the day. Because I knew that I felt good in terms of physically, I felt really good coming out of the water. I knew that I hadn't done anything to hurt me for that day, other than maybe going a couple of minutes slower or whatever than I necessarily wanted to. But that can be made up on the back end by making sure that you proceed in a logical way, that you're able to save a little bit for that run, and you can make it up in different ways. So, yeah, I got on the bike and went down the other side of the corkscrew. So then you go down this thing on the opposite side of transition, and you shoot on a John Nolan Boulevard. And give or take 2 or 3 miles into that, I bounced a water bottle off the back of my bike.
Oh, man.
So I had to stop, run over, grab the water bottle, back on my bike, and then start going. That was, I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, man, that was a rookie mistake. But oh well, it happens. You move on with life. And, I think that my biggest point there was that I was trying to use just about every person that I was passing on the bike to continually make sure that I was working as little as possible. So, I was trying to do about 245 watts, and anytime that I would pass somebody, I'd hang on their back because you have 25 seconds to pass them, and I would use them to slingshot me past them, each person. And I think I look at the statistics after the race and on one of the websites, and I passed a little over 200 people in the first 18 miles of that bike.
Wow.
So then I was just over 300th out of the water. So I was able to make up a significant amount of ground on that first 18 miles of the bike stretch there on the way out to Verona.
And that's before you get to the lollipop itself, because you're on the stick at this point.
Yep. So the stick is about 14 miles for Ironman Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah. Give that perspective.
Now, whenever you started actually getting into the bike ride, how was the bike ride going for you?
It was going incredibly well. Honestly, in terms of my own game plan, I never strayed from it. So every 20 minutes, an alarm would go off on my watch telling me to eat either blocks or goo. I was making sure I was drinking all the Gatorade that was in front of me. Anytime that I would eat something, the Cliff Blocks or the goo Roctane, I was taking a swig off of water. You really don't want to wash down salty, sugary stuff with more salty, sugary stuff. Doesn't necessarily go well. So I drink water in between. Anytime that I felt like I needed to cool down, I kept that water bottle on the down tube so that I could squirt some water down my back. Believe it or not, yeah, it was about low 60s when we were starting the bike, or high 50s or low 60s, but I still heat up fairly well. I'm a very, very much the type of person who will struggle in a warmer climate. But I made sure that I was sticking to my plan, and, otherwise one of the biggest things, and I had a bike fit done about 2 months before the race, where the bike fitter was able to get my elbows about, I would say, an additional 3 inches per elbow wider, which seems like it's a bad aerodynamic move. However, what happens is when I was able to go wider with my elbows, I was able to compress my body or crouch down and allow my shoulders to clear such that I could get lower on the top of the bike. And I would, for the most part, I keep my head down when I'm biking. So I'll take a momentary glance up to take a picture of the road, and then I'll put my head back down and I'll keep my eye on the white line and keep my tire near that. So that's how I tend to race, is that I take that mental picture, and then about every 10 seconds, I give it a quick glance and make sure that I'm on top of, are there turns coming up? Are there something technical that I need to be aware of? Is there a crack in the road? Anything like that. But that was kind of how I was trained by my cycling coach to be able to race these events at the fastest potential that I can have.
Okay. So just a quick few questions about the bike course. How was the road quality here?
It's Wisconsin, so you're dealing with winter conditions that tend to make the roads really bad. I would say that they were able to go out there, and compared to previous years, it was fantastic. The road quality was much better than it had been in the past. They did a lot of patchwork, and yeah, it's bumpy, but you're going to struggle with that in many ways in a lot of places where you're dealing with all 4 seasons. So when the roads warm up and they cool down, yeah, there's cracks and there's heaves and things like that tend to happen. So overall, the bike course was in very great shape.
Okay. Did you see a lot of flats or mechanicals?
There are no flats on that course, really.
No, I'm talking about flats with other cyclists.
Oh, flat tires. Pardon me. I did not see very many. I saw one person changing a flat out there.
Did you see a lot of wrecks?
I saw one wreck behind me, and that was, they were climbing a hill, and it was on the second loop. So it happened to have been the case that 2 people were climbing next to each other, and one person swerved into the other person, probably because they were, a gear that they weren't able to pedal efficiently and climb properly. But that was the only wreck that I saw out there.
Okay. Now, with the aid stations on this course, how were they?
They were great. The volunteers usually they've done this before. They are the same volunteers from the previous year. So if you get a Gatorade bottle, the seal has been removed, so you don't have to sit there and fiddle with that, which is great. And if you're moving quicker and you're not willing to stop, they'll run with you to make sure that the handoff is a lot softer than if you're going by at a high speed and they're standing still. It can bounce off of you fairly easily. I'm very thankful for the volunteers and their education and ability to make sure that I had the best day possible out there on that bike.
Okay. Now, in your bike special needs, what did you put in there?
I had 2 spare CO2 cartridges and I think a spare tube. That's it. Okay. I don't use it. It is purely a special need if I need it out there for whatever purpose that might be. But otherwise, I carry everything I need with me at the start of the bike.
Now, as far as the bike ride goes, is there anything you'd tell us want to be aware of that hasn't done this particular bike course before?
The biggest thing is that if you are going to be out on this course and you are going to want to succeed on this course, you're going to have to be able to be comfortable going fast on downhills. The key to this course for racing it fast is that it's a roller after a roller. So you hit a downhill, there's going to be an uphill right afterwards. So being able to carry that momentum from the downhill into the base of the next one, and I'll aid you in being able to climb it and not expend extra energy because you break down a downhill where you may have, I think that I looked at my max speed during the race and I did 47 miles an hour on a downhill at one point. But otherwise, the big key there is on those downhills, carrying that momentum in the base of the uphill. Because it's one downhill after another and you hit an uphill right afterwards. So the most important part is being able to carry that momentum forward and using that momentum to get you up the hill on the next side. And then once you're on that uphill, whether you're using perceived exertion or you're using power, making sure you're not expending too much effort to climb that, such that you're burning yourself out and burning matches at every point along the way. That is the absolute key to that course. It's a technical course, and then there's a lot of turning. So when you're turning, knowing how to take the proper line and stay in arrow, staying down. If you're able to stay in arrow, you're going to save yourself a lot of time out on that course.
Okay. Now, whenever you think of the miles 80, 90, and 100, mentally, where a lot of people enter these dark places and start having the negative thoughts of, oh my gosh, I still have an hour or 2 or 3 left on the bike. Where was your headspace at?
I honestly was feeling really, I had a picture, my monitor was showing me what my actual pacing was and how fast I was going. And I was incredibly shocked at how fast I was going for the effort level. So at that point, I was actually kind of in a really good place. I felt really, really good. And I was excited about what that bike was starting to turn into. I knew that I was on something that day. I was really, really, this was a good day. And I knew that the key at that point was keep calm, continue to race your race, and stay on top of nutrition at that point. Because if your nutrition starts to fall apart when you start to feel fatigued, that's when things can really start compounding on top of each other. So the hills on the back part of that second loop, when I hit those and I was able to climb out of them and I said goodbye to the last one, actually the very last hard hill on the loop, was a left turn that goes into an uphill. And I made a bad move of, I was cross-chained, so I was on the biggest gear in the back and the biggest one in the front. And I tried to downshift on the front, and I jumped my chain right into my bike frame, and I dropped the chain. So I had to jump off the bike and pull it out, and I ended up cutting my hand open pretty bad.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you cut your hand open?
On one of the chain rings, the tooth bit into me and just ripped open at the base of my thumb. So I was bleeding and jumped back on the bike after I got the chain out. I think that was 30 seconds wasted there, and kind of kicked myself for a moment for not thinking, okay, you should have downshifted, shift into a harder gear in the back before you shift in the front. That way you don't have the pull from the biggest gear in the back to pull it into your frame. But anyways, it was a mistake that I shouldn't have made, and you move on with life. And I climbed the hill and I kind of looked down at my hand and yeah, it's bleeding. All right, well, we'll move on with life. And, I don't know. For some reason that day I was very optimistic about where it was going, and that wasn't going to hurt me. So.
Gotcha. Now, you did have the fastest bike split in your age group at 5:02:28, which is phenomenal. 22.22 miles per hour. Good job.
Thank you. Yep.
Now, with that, the last mile or so of the bike ride, are you doing anything to start preparing to start running?
If I could, so I will say that if you look at the bike course on IRONMAN Wisconsin, on they call it the stick. So it's a stick with a double loop and then the stick back in. On that stick, there's one last hill and then you hit a downhill. So for those who are wondering, no, I do not jump off the bike to go to the bathroom. If I need to go to the bathroom, I go. So at that point, I knew that, okay, it's time to go to the bathroom for the last time if I need to. Once I get into about 2 miles out, if I was nearing a downhill or anything like that, I try to stretch my calves out a little bit. I do that when I'm going to the bathroom because I stop pedaling actually, and I kind of stand up a little bit to stretch my calves out as well. So I get a couple of things taken care of in that way. But otherwise, going into transition in particular at that point, I was just thinking about, all right, do I need it? How's my stomach feeling? Should I eat anything more? At that point, it was, because I was doing every 20 minutes. At 5 hours, I was due to eat something. Do I want to wait until I'm farther into the run before I eat something? Do I eat something 10 minutes ahead of time? So I was kind of playing that game. I ended up eating a little bit about 10 minutes before I got off the bike, so about 3.5 miles out or so. And then I went in and got into transition. So you have to climb back up the corkscrew. And once I got in, I handed off the bike, which at that point I thanked it for the great ride, and I started running into transition there.
Wow. It seems like you have learned how to see yourself and feel of your body objectively.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. After having that really rough year the year before, I knew what bad felt like. And I have been through enough shorter distance races where I've felt the effects of dehydration or improper electrolyte balances and things like that. And I will say for the number of good races I've had, I've probably had 2 or 3 not so good races. It's been a giant learning experience over the last 4 years of doing this. But at that point, I do have a very objective point of view on what I'm feeling. I'm not the type of person who's going to look at myself and say, no, you really don't feel that way. Okay, you take it at face value. If I'm feeling this way, why am I feeling this way? And then what do I do about it? It's more of a problem solution sort of way that I approach it, very analytically.
Okay. Now, whenever you get to transition to, you're in there for less than 2 minutes, very, very quick. How was this going for you? Did you kind of have an idea of where you were in the race?
I knew, no, I did not know where I was in the race until I got out on the run. I knew I was having a really good day. I didn't know if there was somebody ahead of me in my age group. I didn't know who was behind me. All I knew was that I had a goal. I had a goal pacing and I had a goal power for the run. And at that point, I forgot about what was going on the bike. And it was all about, all right, what do I do going forward? So it was making sure I got out of my cycling gear as quickly as possible. The volunteers helped me. I mean, those people are fantastic. They're wearing gloves and, they're helping you strip off socks or putting them in the bag, drop everything there. It's very, very, you're fortunate for anything that they'll give you. But it's the, knowing what was coming and knowing about the fact that, okay, now I have a marathon to go. How do I feel? Am I going to try to approach this at a faster than what I feel I should be doing or what I planned on doing pace? Or should I stick with the plan or do I hold back a little bit in the beginning to be able to go forward? That was what I was really going through in my head at that point.
Okay. Now you get to the run, you have to run down the helix?
Nope. So they actually, at this point, you are on city level would be what I would call it. So the second or third floor of Monona Terrace is on that level. The water is down below street level. And so you run directly out onto a road. Actually, you run through all the bikes in transition, and instead of going left to go down the helix, you go right. And you head out into the city of Madison.
Okay. And now then your coach was here. Vicky, did I tell you kind of where you were?
She was still out on the bike course. She had other athletes. She had other athletes. I didn't fault her for that in any moment. She knew at that point that I was way ahead of where, she probably had me thought to be. And she was out on the bike course. I didn't see her until the second loop, but my parents were out there. And my dad held up 2 fingers and said, "You're number 2. Go." And he also said 4 minutes in front of me. So that was where the person was that was in first place.
How did that make you feel?
Honestly, motivational. It was, I'm going to run this person down. That's kind of how I felt at that point is, all right, I'm feeling really good. They can't be feeling as good as me. I'm going to run this person down is kind of how I approached it at that point. Might not have been the greatest way of approaching it. I probably should have held a little bit back as you can see my splits were really good on the first half marathon, and I fell apart in the second half marathon. But it was, I was motivated to try and catch this person. And I had no idea where I was overall at that point. It's not something for me to think about trying to win one of these races. It's more along the lines of I knew I wanted that Kona slot. So I knew that I was there if I would just maintain where I was at or pass the person in front of me.
Wow. Now, whenever you start getting to the first 2, 3, and 4 miles of the run, are you having any pain, GI issues, cramping? What's your body feeling at this point?
I had no GI issues throughout the whole race. I actually didn't have to go to the bathroom on the run at all. Yes, I am impressed about that as well. I don't know where it came from in my body, but I'm not going to complain about it at all either. The cramping, I started to notice a little bit of that my hips were a little sore at that point. And also that the shoes that I was wearing were a lighter weight shoe than the heavier training cushiony shoe that I wear for a lot of the longer training days. And, I'm used to wearing this shoe, but it wasn't feeling proper that day. So I actually kind of felt, it rubbing in a couple of places, and I was starting to get some hot spots in a couple of points of my feet. But at that point, I just kind of pushed it in the back of my head, and I said, oh, well, it's going to be what it's going to be, and you just got to keep on running. Otherwise, I was running aid station to aid station, making sure I was staying on top of a glass of water at every aid station and then a glass of Gatorade at every aid station. And run with a stride power meter, also between 290 and 300 watts was what I was looking at for a running wattage that I thought would be able to get me to the finish line without blowing myself out of the water.
Right.
So
now, a potential improvement here that might be coming in the future based off of what I learned from the South Africa series is they actually have water sachets down in South Africa that they use instead of water cups. And this would allow you to literally take a couple of water sachets, put in your kit, and then drink one right now, and then drink one in between the aid stations. And as long as you discard the trash in the aid stations, you're good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How awesome would that be?
That would be, especially because cups are just inherently messy, and especially, the amount of Gatorade I probably dumped on myself trying to drink while running, it's Gatorade abuse. But that would be awesome. Any way that they can make it easier to get your hydration, get your nutrition in an effective manner, I'm thankful for. So that would be awesome. And the other thing I'll say is that I was carrying a water bottle with me, and the main purpose of that water bottle was after I was timing my goo Roctanes every 3.3 miles was my lap point. So I broke up the run into 8 portions is kind of the way I looked at it. And so 3.3 miles works out to be 13.2 miles per 4. So, 26.4 miles. And in each lap, I would take a shot off of the giant goo flask that I had and take in some goo Roctane that had extra salt, that had the caffeine, and making sure I was staying on top of that for as long as possible as well. So I carried a water bottle with me for that reason, to make sure that if I hit it at a point where I was in between aid stations, I didn't want to miss it, to run to another aid station and, inherently deprive my body of calories that way.
Right. Now, whenever you start getting to the later portion of the run, miles, say 12, 13, 14, 15, you're beginning to get passed by some people in your age group.
Yes.
How did this take a toll on you mentally?
I saw him coming for a long way. Ironman Wisconsin has a lot of out and back points. There's a lot of turnarounds where you're running past people that are behind you. And I knew that he was initially I timed it 4 or 5 minutes back at one point, and then he was 4 or 3 minutes back, and I knew he was catching ground on me. Once I got to the turnaround point, so you run up State Street, which is uphill, then you run around the Capitol building, and then you do the turnaround right next to the finish line. It's a double loop for the Ironman Wisconsin run course. And when I was going back out on the run and I saw him coming around the Capitol, I knew that I was starting to lose it at that point, that he was going to catch me. Now, was I comfortable with that? No. Did it bother me that I was giving a little bit back? Yes. Did I try and figure out, is there anything I can do at this point to make it better? I started to try and figure that out. And my way of doing that was I figure I need more energy. My legs need more energy to continue to push through this. So I switched from the Goo Roctanes over to Coca-Cola at that point, which they offer on the race course, because that's a direct sugar into your bloodstream. There's zero work that your body needs to do, and I was trying to get energy that way. But by the time that he passed me, that was just after Camp Randall Stadium. They run us around inside the actual stadium on the AstroTurf. And when I came out and I started heading out, so it was about, give or take, 16 miles or so, 15 to 16 miles into the race. Him and a buddy of mine from the Twin Cities, or a friend of mine that I know, his name's Josh Mork, were running together. And Josh said hi. And what ended up happening at that point that isn't evident is that the person who passed me, his chip wasn't being picked up because it didn't mark him as starting the run. So whenever I would talk to somebody, they would tell me that third place was 15 minutes behind me or 10 minutes behind me. But I saw his calf that had 29 or 27 or whatever it was, his age on the back of it. So I knew he was there, but I was kind of questioning, am I reading that correctly? Is it a 30? Am I just not able to see it? And all of my friends, my parents, my coach at that point were telling me, you're way ahead of the person who's number 3. So when he passed me, I actually asked him, what's your age group? He said 25, 29. Okay. So at that point, I knew I was past. And turns out that he also was right next to me in the swim. I recognized his face, even though he had a swim cap on and his goggles, and you can't tell what anybody looks like when they have a swim cap on. And I recognized his facial features, so I knew he started the swim roughly at the same time as I did as well. So at that point, I knew I was in third. And I also knew, thanks to everybody else out there, where number 4 was. So they were really much farther back of me at that point. And so at that point, it became okay, I'm not giving up third. I'm not going to allow 4th to catch me. But I also am not going to, I'm not going to throw in the towel and let this become a walk fest out there either. I knew that I could force my legs to run if I really needed to. So the key for me on that back part of the race was, yes, I did walk. I walked the last time that I climbed Observatory Hill because I didn't want to burn my legs out trying to climb a hill where I still had another 6 miles to run afterwards. And that could burn me on the back half when I really did need to climb a hill, which was State Street coming back into the Capitol at the finish line. So I made judicious choices about where I was going to walk, such that I saved the energy that I had, as well as took in calories whenever I got to an aid station, and I would make sure I got all of it and didn't drench myself in Gatorade and Coke at that point. I wanted to make sure I was getting the proper nutrition that I needed to make sure that I was doing the best that I could.
Okay. Now, miles 18, 19, 20, and 21, how was your mindset?
I was disappointed in myself. I was disappointed that at that point you start playing the game. I probably should have gone a little slower on the bike so I had more in the run. But then you turn around and you think about it, well, he was behind me off the bike. So if he's behind me off the bike and he wasn't that much farther back, if I would have given back, time on the bike, he might have been ahead of me in the run. Now I got to catch. So, I think he ended up beating me by about 12 minutes overall on the race. And to the, right now, I can't think of where I could have gotten 12 minutes back on that race. It just so happened on that particular day that, number 2 was not in the cards for me. And I've made peace with, that's not something that I feel bad about or anything like that. Kid's a heck of an athlete. You got to appreciate what he's, capable of doing and the type of run he was able to put together. But if there was one thing that I could say that I wish I would have had from that race was a better balance. If I would have given 5-6 minutes back on the bike to be able to have a run that was a 3:20 instead of a 3:32 or whatever it was, okay, you're netting 6 or 7 minutes. That doesn't change anything from the standpoint I'm still third place in my age group, but I feel better about myself on the back half of that run. So if there was one thing that you do start to think about at that point, it was that. Otherwise, no, I was happy as heck that I was going to finish in under 10 hours. I could not have asked for more in that regard, and I knew that I was going to be able to do that, and it was my goal from the beginning that if I could put myself in a position where I knew 950 would be really a good spot to be to try and qualify for Kona on a basis of what other people have done to get there before, but I didn't know. It just depends on who shows up that day. That's what you're always, not aware of. So
now, did you enter into any dark spots of negativity?
I would say, yeah. There was one moment of real negativity, and I got mad at a manhole cover. I was 24 miles into it, and I was coming into those last 2 miles, coming back around Camp Randall Stadium, and there was a manhole that was raised. The pavement around it was raised, and my toe clipped it, and I ate it on the pavement. I face planted. I spoiled out. My water bottle went flying.
Did anybody see this?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Somebody saw it in there. Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. Dang it. All right. So now at that point, you're 138 miles into this thing, and you got to pick yourself up off the ground and make sure that you can continue to start running. That was a little bit difficult. That was a dark moment. I got mad. But really, I can't say that other than that, really hit a bottom. I became very okay with what I was able to accomplish. I had a lot of appreciation, especially after the year before. That was any time that I was struggling during that race, I thought back on what the day could have been and knowing how bad it can actually get. That's one thing that, on that day I was racing a good race, and I knew that. And at the end of the day, if I didn't get there, I was also okay with that too. If I didn't get to Kona, I was okay with that too. So it was a goal. It was a dream. And as far as I was concerned, it could always be a dream. But no, I was not going to let something about, my abilities on that particular day bring me down from what I was actually able to accomplish.
Wow. Now, as far as the funniest thing that you can remember that you saw on the run course, what do you remember the scene that was funny? Any special volunteers dressed in certain ways, athletes dressed a certain way, anything that was funny to you, aside from the manhole cover?
The manhole cover just made me angry. It was the look on a Green Bay Packers fan's face when I asked the Viking fans next to him what the score of the game was, and they told me we won, and I gave a big fist pump, and the boos that I got from that moment. Yeah, I like winding them up a little bit. That's always good. Otherwise, funny was all the signs out there are fantastic. If there's one thing I can say about Ironman Wisconsin versus any other Ironman race that so many people have told me about, they've raced it and their experiences, the people that come out to watch Ironman Wisconsin, it's the whole community. It's a small college town. I mean, yes, it's the state capital of Wisconsin, but it is really a small college town. And you get all of your frat boys out there sitting on their porches, drinking beer, cheering you on. It's fun. I mean, it's a fun environment. They're a great distraction. So that's, if there's something to be said for it, it's that if you're looking to do an Ironman and it's going to be your first one, I highly recommend it. Yeah. I can't say enough good things about that race.
Wow. Now, whenever you checked into this event, did you get a volunteer race band to give to a volunteer?
I did.
Who did you give it to?
I gave that one. I'm trying to remember what point it was in the run. It's coming underneath an underpass, and it was the first time I walked on the run. And the small girl that was standing there, you know, clearly her parents had brought her out or whatever it was. And that was my way of saying thank you. She gave me Gatorade. So I wasn't running at that point, so I was able to slip it off and hand it to her and gave it to her saying thank you. Also, it was, you know, you're in the shade at that point. You're not standing out in the sun, but, you know, the thankfulness that I had that, you know, even little kids are out there helping you out on the race course volunteering. That's, you know, that's pretty awesome. So that was that particular one.
Wow. Now, whenever you start getting to mile 25 and a half, you're approaching the finish line, you kind of have an idea of not only where you're at in the race, but where you're at time-wise with the race lining up for you, and you kind of have a good understanding of where you're going to finish at. How was the last 800 meters of the run?
I had a gentleman in front of me, and I don't remember his age group. I know he wasn't mine. So, honestly, one of those things that I wanted to make sure that I did was that I took the finish line for myself. I have watched the race where, you know, you have somebody who's trying to pass somebody right at the finish line, and they're just trying to beat them to the finish line. That wasn't what I was going to do that race. And that might sound a little weird to some people that I wasn't willing to try and get into 19th place overall or whatever it would have been. As far as I was concerned, I also don't know when that person started the swim. So how do I know that if I run past them that I'm going to be actually ahead of them as chip time goes? So I kind of gave a glance back behind me. There wasn't really anybody behind me. And I gave it a strong, hard effort all the way uphill, all the way into the finish line. And I let that gentleman in front of me have his finish to himself. So I let him kind of take his time running to the finish line. And I went over to the spectators that were on the right-hand side, and I started high-fiving the spectators as I was running down the chute into the finish line. And I saw the time that was on the clock. I was able to see my own, and I was under 9 hours and 55 minutes. And my day was coming to an end. I was excited for that. Getting to the finish line, feeling as good as I did. I couldn't have asked for a better finish. And of course, every time that Mike Riley, you know, says your name out loud and says you are an Ironman, you really can't take, you know, that moment for granted. So I wanted to make sure that it was mine at that point.
Wow. So emotionally, how was this for you?
It was fantastic. I got to the finish. I had a big smile on my face. You know, I knew that I was third. I knew I was third. And it didn't bother me that I was, or, you know, anything like that from the standpoint of at that time, I did not think they were going to give 3 slots to my age group based on the number of competitors. I did not think we were going to get 3 slots. There were only 40 to be handed out at Wisconsin to begin with. So as far as I was concerned, I wasn't going to Kona, but I had run my race and I had finished it to the best of my ability. And I felt damn good at the finish line. I went over and I said hi to my family. I gave them a hug. And then, as I promised them from early on before the race, I was going to go and get an IV that day. So turns out the day that I went in, so they weigh you on the day you check in. They weigh you to make sure that they have an idea of what your weight is naturally when you're hydrated and such. And my weight was, because I ate a big breakfast and I drank a ton of water on purpose, I was about a pound or 2 heavier than I usually would be on race day. So I was about 4 pounds light, and they hooked me up to an IV, and that hydration was magical. I was able to actually that evening go back out, hang out with people. We had my old roommate Jack came over to the hotel. We had a couple of cocktails, sat around and talked, and just really enjoyed that moment of being having a good finish after the year before. That was the biggest thing, and knowing as well that my friend Hannah had finished so strong, and then we were watching all the other, checking the app to see where other finishers were that were tri-fitness athletes, and seeing how everybody was performing so well that day. It was very nice. So
awesome. Now, whenever you think of what you learned, not only from this race experience, but your previous race experiences at this race, what is something that you would want to pass on to athletes that haven't done this race before?
For this race in particular, I would say just, especially if you're not going to be out there trying to Kona qualify, that's a different animal. You're racing for a different purpose in my mind than if you're out there to finish your first Ironman. When you're out there to finish your first Ironman, just soak it all in. I mean, really, there's no reason to be a mean person out there. There were people who were a little frustrated at some points with volunteers doing something or whatever. I heard people grumbling, or that some person was frustrated that they didn't cancel the swim because they thought that the bacteria levels were too high. You're fortunate to be able to do this sport. If there was one thing from 2011, the first time 9/11, 2016, when I did this the first time, there was a gentleman, if you go back to the race video for that year, who walked the whole marathon in his full military gear, and he had the American flag strapped on his back. And he represented the people that, had died, 15 years before that at that point. And having my first year be on 9/11 was special for me. I really can say that I appreciate more because of it, and appreciate that we're able to do this, and we have the means to be able to do it, because whether you like it or not, you're in the top 10% for the most part if you're able to do this, because of the amount of volume of training, the time it takes, the nutrition costs, the eating costs. I mean, physically being able to feed yourself for the amount that you're going to have to consume to be able to do this race, because you're burning so many calories training. It doesn't take a lot of looking around to realize that you're fortunate. So realize you're fortunate, realize that you're out there to enjoy the day, and then when you do get to that finish line, make it your own. That's the biggest thing that I can say. Make it your own. And, don't lose. If you ever do another one after that, or do 5, 10, 15 Ironmans, make sure that you do appreciate getting to that finish line every time, because there are a lot of people who start that race that don't get there.
Wow. Now, how could Ironman have made your race experience at this race even better than what it was?
How could Ironman have made it better? Honestly, the only thing that I can say is the corral start. Yeah,
what do you mean?
The corrals that they had, or the rolling start and the signs, divided up a little bit better. Make sure that the people who really are going to go under an hour, there's a spot for them at the very front. Section it off better so you know where to stand. You can have a better sense of where to start the race. That was a little bit tough there from that standpoint, but otherwise, Ironman Wisconsin's been around for so long that they know what the heck they're doing out there, and they do a fantastic job putting on a race. It's the best supported training day of your life.
Wow.
You could say.
It seems like you really approach each race with a lot of gratitude.
Yep, I do.
So how would you feel about it being a controlled mass start rather than a rolling start where everybody's time starts differently, but it'd be a mass start, and where you line up, well, your time is still going to start whenever the first person enters the water.
So the mass start used to be Ironman Wisconsin. So the first year I did it, it was the true mass start where it was everybody was in the water, they fired the cannon, and you went. I loved it. I love that environment. You have to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder if you're going to put yourself on the buoy line and you're going to be at the very front of the line, that you're going to have your space and you're going to make, you know what you're signing up for. And, positioning yourself such that you're comfortable with where you are in the water. Otherwise, I really enjoy that start, actually. That's my favorite one to do. So if they went back to it, I would love to see it.
Well, what I'm actually proposing is still do the rolling start like they did here. However, everybody's time starts whenever the first athletes enter the water. So regardless of where you seed yourself, your time is clock time.
That's harder because I don't know how I feel about that, because then at that point, you're going to have people who are going to want to get themselves to the front just so that they have the true, most time out on the course to get to the finish line. And that they're, I guess, the problem there would be that you're going to have people who shouldn't be at the front there, who are going to be climbed over, who are going to impede the forward progress of people who are inevitably faster.
Right. So there's an issue there.
Yep, that would be my biggest concern with that. I do like the chip time. I like the way that they did it this year. If it wasn't the mass start, then I like this one. This would be the way I would do it.
Okay.
Yep.
So we covered quite a bit about your race experience in general on race day. Do you have anything else to add about your race?
Other than the race itself, no, I can't honestly think. We covered basically everything. Did a fantastic job about all the different components of that race. The only other thing that I can say is that, making sure that you give your card the little slip for checking out your bike and all of your other gear bag to your parental or some friend of the family or something like that after the fact, because you don't want to go back and walk down there and go and grab it yourself after the race. You're usually in pretty rough shape, and I was thankful that my dad and my buddy went and got my stuff for me. Otherwise, no, I think that we covered just about everything for race day.
Wow. So the day after the race, you get the luxury of going to the award ceremony.
Yep.
And not only going to the award ceremony, but actually getting on the podium. Yeah. What was this experience like getting on the podium?
It was fun. I was so, at that point, I was, okay. So at that point, and I'm going to tell you exactly how my mind works. So this is my analytical brain. I woke up that morning about 4:30 in the morning, and I started doing math. So I knew how many finishers there were in each age group, and I knew how many slots. I knew which age groups had finishers. So I started breaking down the possibility of me getting a Kona slot. And I knew that there was a chance that, and I'll be quite honest, by math, my slot was the last one to be awarded for the race, by my math. I didn't know how many starters there were, which is how they base it off of, but I knew how many finishers, which I figured it was proportional in regard. So I knew going into that award ceremony that there was a 50 shot that I could be getting a Kona slot. So when I got on the podium and I was able to stand up there with a lot of my friends that I knew that were around. Joe Adrians was there, Sean was there, Hannah was there, Josh was there. Some of my other friends from Minnesota were just hanging around. They went to the brunch that morning. So, having those people there to support me on stage and getting my third place trophy, that was really cool. Shaking Mike Riley's hand. He announces your name, but how often do you get to shake the voice of Ironman's hand? That was pretty awesome. There was one moment that I do remember picturing was that. So, yes, it was.
So after you get your trophy, then you can actually get back down, because after the award ceremony, that's when they do the actual Kona slot allocation ceremony.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Did you know at this time that you were going to get a slot? When did you find out that you were getting the slot?
So, allocation ceremony was supposed to start at 11 o'clock, and their paperwork was taking forever. They actually didn't start until 11:20 or something like that. So I had no idea. And then they started at the oldest age groups first, awarding slots. And they go 70 to 74 women, then men. 65, 69 women, then men, and so on all the way up. By the time they got to 35 to 39 men, and that slot, I believe, that group got, I think, 4 slots, if I remember correctly, based on my math. It was 40 to 44, 35 to 39. They got 4 slots. And when that came through, that they were 4, I knew my math was pretty good. So at that point, I didn't say anything to my parents who were sitting next to me, but I was getting ready to hear. And when they got to 25 to 29 men and announced that we got 3 slots, I had to hold myself together, but my mom completely lost it. So, yes.
So, hold on. What was it like seeing your mom, like, get emotional because of your achievement? What was that like?
It was, there's only been one other experience like it for me. I was a golfer, and I did really well one year, and I was almost going to go to state. And when after the first round, she lost it when I shot a 72. But this was even bigger. I mean, my mom was just in tears, and I was in shock, and I can't even describe it. There's no words that can describe that moment, that actually how I felt. And the fact that I knew I didn't have to hope for a roll down. I know that I didn't have to wait to see if somebody else to take their slot. I knew that I was going, and that it was because I had performed such that I was able to get there. I couldn't believe it.
Wow. So whenever you actually got up to the stage, is that when you lost your composure?
I kept it together pretty well. The only moment where I actually lost a little bit of composure was, so you go up, they give you your lay, and then they give you your paperwork telling you that you're going to have to pay $1,000 to go and race in Kona. Small price to pay to, accomplish your dream and to go there. But when I called my coach as I was standing in line, she had to get back. She had a race that she was running. She also runs races up here and had other obligations. And she just told me, let me know how things go. And I called her, and she lost it on the phone. That was when I had to hold it together pretty hard.
What did she say to you? Or how did that conversation go?
It went, she answers and she says, so, and then said, we're going to Kona. And immediately she screams, and then just immediately I can hear her start tearing up on the other side and saying how hard I've worked for this and how much, sacrifice I had to make to get there. And, how hard it was before to watch me struggle the year before. To see me come through in this way was, it was very special. So I can't wait to do Kona with her and, make sure that I'm able to survive on that day. But so it's an incredibly special moment for us.
Wow, that is so awesome. So now that you're going to Kona, definitely going next year. Obviously not this year, thankfully.
Yes.
So you have a little time to prepare and all that fun stuff. So I would definitely like to hear about some races that you do next year and welcome you back on the show after those, and definitely Kona next year.
Sounds fantastic. I would love to be back on with you.
Awesome. So just to kind of wrap up here, I have a few more questions here. What's next for you right now aside from Kona?
Right now, healing, making sure I'm getting back to being healthy. I'm not going to run for a little bit here, but I was already back on the bike, spinning my legs out. I started racing bike doing cyclocross a while back, 4 years ago or whatever it was. I don't want to get back into doing cyclocross. So I actually did a build for myself here in August, and I built myself a new cyclocross bike. So I'm going to do a little bit of cross this fall. And then looking into getting into doing fat bike racing in the wintertime, and also some cross-country skiing up here. Nice. And that's kind of my plan for the winter is do a lot of cross training and see if I can build some strength in that way. A friend of mine, Sean, guy's a beast on the bike. He's got an FTP of 400, and he basically, says that a lot of it is due to the fact he does this fat bike racing. So I'm excited for it. It's going to be a riot.
Wow, that sounds so fun. Now, you've been doing triathlons for just 4 years, and you've only really been an athlete for about 4 years, and now you're getting to go to Kona next year, so you can't count that in this question. What races are on your bucket list?
Boston Marathon is on my bucket list. That's one that I'm considering doing for, after Kona, trying to qualify for that. I would love to do New Zealand Ironman. That looks just like a complete riot. Ironman 70.3 World Championships at some point when it's in a location that looks like it would be just a blast. Affordable, a blast, a complete riot. And otherwise, at this point, I need to evaluate. This was my goal. This was my dream. This is what I was going for. So I guess I'm going to have to build a new list and, see where that takes me. But to a certain extent, a lot of my enjoyment comes out of racing in this community. The Minnesota triathlon community is unbelievable. And we have a race announcer here. His name is Jerry McNeil. Jerry is at every big race and knows everything about every athlete. If they've done a triathlon, from the top end triathletes who are, amateur, I would call them amateur professionals, incredibly fast, awesome athletes, down to the people who are finishing at the back end of the race. He knows everything about them. He's an incredible person, and this triathlon community is very special here in Minnesota. So racing in local races and continuing to build on the relationships that I have here in the community as well is important to me.
Wow. So how can athletes follow you?
Athletes can follow me on Facebook. My name is Nick Serratore, and otherwise I am the most social media inept person that is probably on the face of the earth. I was a grad student and I was a TA and such that I didn't want my students following me, so therefore I don't have anything. Probably could eventually get onto that, but if I do end up deciding to forward with it, I've been asked if I would do a blog for the upcoming year so that family and people like that can follow me. I'll make sure to post it on my Facebook so that other people can get in touch and see what I'm doing.
Nice. Well, Nick, it's been a pleasure having you on. And with that said, I only have one more question, and this is always my favorite question to ask.
Absolutely.
And that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
My definition of a perfect race would be, to a certain extent, I'll say there is no perfect race, because for me, I'm always trying to improve. But the perfect race is the one where you come out of it feeling like you have given just everything that you had to give that day, and you can't help but smile about it. You're thankful, you're appreciative, and there's nothing left that you could have done to make yourself have a better day that day.
Wow. That's great. Well, thank you, Nick, for coming on, sharing your experience, and I look forward to following you at Kona next year, and I would love to have you back on in between because I'm sure you're going to do a few lead-up races, and I would love
Absolutely.
to have you be a part of what I'm doing here. Thank you so much for coming on and spending nearly 2 hours with me today.
Of course. Absolutely. I'm glad to have had the opportunity to be on with you, so thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we'll talk soon. Have a good day.
Absolutely. You too.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you're able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoy the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.